Greetings, everyone. Today I welcome you to Toggle, situated in the Nettle Kingdom, located under the jurisdiction of Fimba. This land is home to one of the most distinctive styles of raising monsters in the world. Many things ranchers do here are entirely unique, and you'll be given minimal guidance in how you ranch your monsters here. At first glance, it can come off as very intimidating, but never fear, my fellow ranchers. There is a consistent logic that you will see throughout to master in your trade. Even here, under these new, strange circumstances. I'll guide you through each of them, and how the system differs from ranches of the past. Welcome to today's installment of Snek's Guide to Monster Rancher. Today we're covering Monster Rancher 4. So you've arrived, fresh off the boat and with a spiffy new, fully rendered avatar we can walk around and interact with our monsters in. This is good, as it will simplify several things and also allow for greater ability to interact. You'll begin by giving your avatar a name. The default is Fane, but surely you can come up with something a bit more personal, I'm sure. And you'll begin with a Garu, a freebie monster that you'll always get on a fresh file. And thus, your ranching career begins in earnest. To begin, you'll need to learn how best to use your schedule and training options seen at the top of your list. It is not unheard of for newcomers to just immediately hit training and end up sleeping their first week away on the ranch. Don't become discouraged, no harm done after all. Scheduling training in this game allows you to prepare a plan for up to 8 weeks in advance. This will help you maintain not just a good rhythm for your monster, as a schedule will loop if it's not amended, and also help you control the frequency of use of training gadgets. Wait, I hear you ask, what are training gadgets? They've never come up before. And right you are. Training gadgets are a new means by which to strengthen monsters. Worry not, the game will not toss these into the fray too quickly. You'll instead begin with basic exercises which do an okay job raising one individual stat each. However, once you go up in rank, training gadgets will become available to you. The first set improved versions of the exercises, each raising one stat a bit more efficiently, at the cost of slowing down the rate at which you bond with your monster. Additionally, gadgets can be obtained during adventures, and we'll get to that here momentarily, but one thing at a time. Monster Rancher 4 is, by and large, more cinematic, and more in the way of plot-relevant events will occur, either being triggered by enough time passing or you acting on certain things. This is especially true in the early game, as our first assistant, Yuri, will offer limited useful advice, and Cesare, chief of the local shrine, will provide us with food to feed our monster. Let's touch on that actually. You might have noticed a series of bars down the corner of the screen, whenever we're standing near our monster, and a few more that show up if you call it the status. The first, pink bar, is bonding, or an overall reflection of monster's loyalty. This will go up slower when the monster is using training gadgets, but not to the point where it will meaningfully inhibit their growth. The next bar, in red, is their focus. That's how seriously the monster is trying to take their training. You don't need to do much specifically to ensure that this remains high if all other conditions are already being met. But generally, try not to praise or scold a monster while resting, as it does lower their focus at least a little bit. Beneath that, in the teal, is fatigue. This is the one gauge you want to keep as low as possible. Obviously, more fatigue means a less motivated and less capable monster, so let your monster rest or use items to help reduce fatigue levels. And lastly, in yellow, is the hunger meter. Unlike before, where feeding the monster was an automatic prompt at the start of each month, you'll be feeding your monster as required instead. Thankfully, the game will automatically sort all the food items you have in descending order of preference for your monster you're interacting with. In other words, the item closest to the top of the list are the ones that they like the best. In Monster Rancher 4, all food items have positive values tied to them, so if your monster wants potatoes, there is no harm in finally feeding them some. And lastly is status, an overall report and summary of all the above conditions. This should be obvious in most cases at a glance, but things like stress levels can still adversely affect this. All of this will go hand in hand with getting the best possible start in battle, so make sure your monsters are well rested and well fed beforehand. While this was always common sense knowledge to any rancher in the past, 4 adds additional benefits, including starting the match with more than 50 guts to start. In fact, you can start with as much as 90 if your monster is in ideal shape. Thus, proper care and planning will reward your efforts with a strong opening in your tournaments. And while you begin at the E rank and must do your best to climb to S rank, the rules by which you do so are a bit different now. To begin, whenever you complete a non-official tournament, you will get 1 star affixed to that monster. In order to compete in an official tournament, your monster must have gained 3 of these stars by winning regular tournaments. Not only is this good practice on the whole, as I've stated previously, but regular tournaments are now much more inclined to offer up free items, particularly foodstuffs while you're in the lower ranks. So in order to raise from each rank to the next, you need to beat a minimum of 3 regular tournaments and then go for the official of that rank. Then proceed to do the same for the next and so on. As time goes on, different formats of tournament will become open to you, each marked with a letter code on the tournament calendar. T for tag tournaments, G for group bouts, and so on. Yes, because eventually your ranch will expand, and you'll be able to raise 3, and then subsequently 5 monsters at any given time. Logically, these will open opportunities to battle 2v2 or using 3 monsters at a time. So you've begun to rank up and started expanding your ranch. Next, let's talk about some nuances. For starters, you will actually get the chance to lay out your ranch as you see fit. See, you can only have so many gadgets out and active at a time and so much space within which to work. This does go up, but it will never exceed a relatively small area and number of allowed gadgets, so you'll need to think it through. Once you get training gadgets, you'll get the prompt to update their layout annually. A later event will allow this to be every 6 months or so. Set up what you plan to use, as that configuration will be your layout for some time. Also, you have to make room for your house and barn, both of which are fairly large. What gadgets you'll need will hinge largely on what you're raising and what you have available. You'll also eventually gain access to special medals, which will unlock different variants of gadgets. There are I, or intense types, which will boost focus, M, or magic versions, which are super versions of the normal, L, or lucky ones, give you a little bit of gold every time you use them, and H, or healing, which reduce how potent the gadget is, but also greatly reduces the amount of fatigue that it will build up. I've only ever gotten the one medal the game literally hands you as a token of goodwill from the plot. I will report back if I ever find another beyond that. Once you have everything set in place, you can then schedule all your monsters, either adjusting week by week as required, or by setting your routine with a more hands-off, automated approach. In past games, you are prompted to praise and scold accordingly. Monster Rancher 4 does not feel the need to hold your hand in respects to this, and allows you to administer these as you see fit. But what are good parameters for doing so? This is up for debate, as no study has been done on this scientifically, but anecdotally I will say that I tend to praise my monsters when the success rate is 80 and over, and scold it when it drops below 60%, excepting extenuating circumstances. To give an example of one of those said circumstances, I had a Modillo training on an M-Pendulum gadget, and he was gaining better stats than any of his peers, all the while getting nothing higher than 55% on his training. 1 week on this thing was so exhausting that it half filled his fatigue bar, and he had to rest on alternating weeks. So needless to say, I didn't feel the need to give him a hard time about this rather difficult regimen. Now that we have some ideas for how training will proceed, let's talk about progressing the game. As said, events move the game's story forward, not unlike a more traditionally structured RPG. So once we have some good gains, it's time to discuss the monster battles a bit more in depth. Battles will mostly be done in a 1v1 format, but as I mentioned, there will be group and tag battles as well. While one monster alone will always be on point during these matches, the others can still assist. If you refrain from attacking for a while, you'll charge up said assist. In a tag battle, that means the next monster in line will launch an attack in sequence after the first one connects. In group battles, mostly expeditions, more on them in just a moment, you can even have unique team moves which will expend all existing guts in your pool in order to have some kind of profound effect, be it a party-wide buff or a massive super attack. You can swap which monster is on point at any time in order to change your strategies on the fly. Also, countering mechanic from Advance 2 makes its return, in a much more elegant fashion. Instead of being a random 1 in 4 chance of interrupting an attack in non-lethal fashion, the game presents an entire new system of risks and rewards for both the attacker and the defender. Let me break this down a little. In this instance, the square, X, and circle buttons all will be used to launch attacks, but each causes minor variations. Attacks launched with the square button will have higher overall damage output. Attacks done with the circle button will be more accurate. Attacks launched with X will have even results in both. And here's where this mechanic can get truly interesting. The more you chain together attacks launched in these fashions, the more you'll build up bonus effects. Attack chains of square inputs incrementally increasing subsequent assault's attack, and circle inputs doing the same for accuracy, and X raising both slightly all the more. On the side of both monster status bars is now a history meter showing the last 5 button inputs from each contender. Countering is now executed by trying to guess which of these inputs the enemy used to launch their attacks. The correct guess resulting in the attacker's attack being interrupted and struck with an attack of the defender's own. Not just that, but these counterattacks can now be fatal, knocking a careless monster out by utilizing a defensive strategy. This creates the most technical and mental monster battling experience the franchise has yet seen, especially when you couple all the above with the next mechanic we need to discuss: adventures. Monster Rancher 4's counterpart to expeditions. You'll now undertake them at any time from your weekend screen when your training for the week is completed, and thus you expend no additional time in doing these. Not only should you do whenever the plot demands them, you should make it a point to do these whenever a good opportunity comes up. You can take up to 3 monsters with you, and you should, and their cumulative stats make up your energy pool, which dictates just how long you can be on these expeditions. If your monsters are even halfway decently trained, it should be far more than enough to complete any of them. While there are 4 major dungeons in the game and their broad strokes are consistent between visits, the dungeon layouts, however, change every time you visit them. Every time you undertake these adventures, you can expect to see entirely new configurations of each. Some of these include optional treasure hunting areas, each tied to special skills that some monsters can learn, like Dirt Search with patches of soft soil your monster can dig into, or Cave Search where they crawl into small holes, or Water Search, which is somewhat obvious in utility by name. Each of these expands upon your potential for finding the mad currencies and sometimes useful items, like Monster Rancher 4's encyclopedic series lore and the Document series of items, or the greatly simplified Fusion items, the Stat Stone series. In fact, you can even find Saucer Stones, the in-game representations of what CDs and DVDs have been for us in the series thus far. These can be exchanged at the shrine in order to fill out more pages of your book and get you species that you don't otherwise have access to. And perhaps more vitally still, the Gadget Blueprint tablets. These will unlock additional training gadgets used to empower your monsters at the ranch. All this and more awaits you as reward for your diligence. On top of that, the random battles you'll participate in will gain you adventure experience, which is how your monsters will gain new attacks and passive traits. This will intimately tie to your training on the ranch as means to grow your monster to even greater heights. Not just that, but their passive traits can have direct and meaningful impact on their overall combat performance. For example, the elemental lore traits allow for further attack customization, being able to apply an elemental alignment to attacks lacking one, and corresponding stat bonuses to each. Most elements will raise 2 stats on an attack and lower 2 in kind. This makes, generally speaking, wind the best element in the game, as it raises accuracy and base attack damage. But the beauty of it is the ability to customize these due to the way your attack reels work. Let's touch on that next since we're back at the ranch now. Your monsters each have 3 reels with 3 attacks each, split up into near, mid, and far distances like before. You can set any attacks, provided they are the correct distance type, into any of the reels as you see fit. This also means you can have multiple copies of the same attack, or the same attack imbued with different elemental properties, in order to give your monsters wider ranges of abilities than they'd normally have access to. Set up your monster's attack reels in order to maximize this efficiency. There's nothing to be gained from having an open space in your reels, so if you can fill them, you should. Therefore, you'll do better in battles, and by extension, better on expeditions, and up and around again. And finally, it will eventually come time to part ways with your monsters as age comes for us all. It should be noted that freezing a monster behaves slightly differently here than anywhere else in the series, as once it's frozen, that monster's life has officially come to an end. You cannot thaw a monster once it has been frozen here. It must either be fused together, or deleted to be removed from the storage. And since deleting a monster is just a loss with no gain, it falls to fuse monsters together. Like in the advanced titles, after you select the 2 monsters to fuse together, you will simply pick the end result of the available fused results from a drop-down list. Pick whichever one you like. Even if the 2 species in question cannot create a hybridized offspring, and thus the resulting fusion is the same type as one parent or the other, it will still gain stats, attacks, and traits from both parents. And, for the first time ever, even a higher official rank from birth. 2 S-ranked monsters, when fused together, will begin their lives in the official rank of C. This, combined with everything I've talked about already, will be your way to the top. So take these new monsters and begin fresh with them, training and adventuring all over again. And that's the upward spiral you'll find yourself following in Monster Rancher 4. Soon you'll be customizing the gadgets on your ranch, balancing the schedule of 3 or perhaps more monsters at the same time, going adventuring, and discovering more and more that awaits you. Thus will you find your way pressing through the story campaign and all the more on your journeys. Soon you'll be tackling the game's super challenging plus dungeons too. That's the way of things here. So join me next time, and I will see you there.